In chapter 2 of Judges, last time we saw that God came to the children of Israel and told them that they had obeyed partially. They had not driven out all the inhabitants of the land. They had not cast down all the altars. And they had made leagues or agreements with the inhabitants of the land. And as a result, God told them that he would not drive out the inhabitants of the land. They would remain and be a thorn in Israel's side. Though this generation had not obeyed completely, they did overall serve the Lord. Something that cannot be said of many other of the generations of the Jews. When this conquest generation was gone, then the children of Israel began to go astray. Verse 10 of chapter 2 says, and also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers, and there rose another generation after them, which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel. Their fathers did right, and saw the wonderful works of God, yet they did not believe their fathers and follow them. In verse 11, chapter 2, it says, and the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam, and they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, of the gods of the people that were round about them, and bound themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtaroth. If you want to be sure you're to be an object of God's divine wrath, as we talked last time, then follow a false god. And here are some of the gods the Jews would have encountered. I went over them last time. I'm going to cover them again because it was in the evening and I know some of you folks weren't here. So El was one. He was a supreme Canaanite deity, a god of uncontrolled lust and a bloody tyrant. Baal, which we're going to see referred to many times. He was son and successor of El. He was Lord of heaven, a farm god of rain and storm, his name meaning Lord Possessor. His call at Phoenicia included animal sacrifices, ritual meals, and licentious dances. Chambers catered to sacred prostitution by men and women were all connected to the worship of this false god. Then Anath, also called Ashtaroth, which we're also going to see frequently, sister wife of Baal, both sister and wife, patroness of physical relations and war. By physical relations, I mean, anyways, I'm trying to sterilize that for the children here. She was called a virgin and holy, but was actually basically just a sacred prostitute. These were the gods that they would have encountered and that they were following after and worshiping instead of Yahweh. Do these sound like the kind of gods that sound sensible to follow after and worship? No. These are not good gods. You know, if you were looking for a friend, and this God was a friend, this is not the kind of friend you want to be around. They're not the ones that are going to encourage you to do good stuff. Yet these are the gods that the Jews went after time and time and time again. So what happens? Verse 14 of chapter 2, and the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. Okay? And he delivered them into the hands of the spoiler, and sold them into the hands of the enemies that were round about them, so that they could not any longer stand before their enemies. Verse 15, whithersoever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil, as the Lord had said, and as the Lord had sworn unto them, and they were greatly distressed. Verse 16, nevertheless the Lord raised up judges, which delivered them out of the hand of those that spoiled them. This sets the stage for the rest of the book of Judges. For the rest of the book, we will see a sequence of Israel falling into sin, God using some people to become a tool for judging the Jews for going astray, and then Israel calls to God for help, and God sends a judge to deliver them from their oppressors. Today we're looking at the first sequences of that, the first illustrations of that sequence. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of this world. 2 Corinthians 10:3 and 4 says, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. God does not fight the way that the world fights. When God goes to war, he usually chooses the most unlikely soldiers, hands them the most unusual weapons, and through them accomplishes the most unpredictable results. Some of these sorts of God-directed warfare we are going to see in the book of Judges. Things along the lines of, seeing a little shepherd boy killing a huge warrior with a shepherd's sling. Stuff along that kind of line. God is at work battling Satan and his armies, and he is looking for men and women with what it takes to win. Power, strategy, and courage. Power, strategy, and courage. Othniel, the power of God. Verse 1, now these are the nations which the Lord left to prove Israel by them, even as many as had not known all the wars of Canaan, only that the generations of the children of Israel might know to teach war at the least such as before knew nothing thereof. God used the Jews' partial obedience as a tool to help teach future generations a lesson. Through these nations they learned both war and righteousness. Verse 3, namely 5 lords of the Philistines and all the Canaanites and the Sidonians and the Hivites, which dwelt in the Mount Lebanon, from the Mount Baal Hermon unto the entering in of Hamath. And they were to prove Israel by them, to know whether they would hearken unto the commandments of the Lord, which he commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. What if we were left without any trials? Minimal sickness. Everyone was nice to us. The TV and the internet had only good, wholesome content. Would we be tried and encouraged to draw closer to God? Would we thank him for his goodness to us and not stray from his side? What if we were put in a beautiful garden where we hardly had to work at all to eat and to live, and we were never sick? Everything was so good, and there was only one thing that we couldn't do. Do you think we would be thankful for that situation? Or do you think we, like Adam and Eve, would go do that one thing that we were told we couldn't do? Our lives are such so that we will rely on the power of God and not the power of ourselves. First Israel, and the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites and the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and they took their daughters to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and served their gods. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and forgot the Lord their God, and served Baalim and the groves. Okay, we just went over who this Baal is. That awful Balaam who was who the Israelites decided to follow instead of God. The inhabitants of the land worshipped him, and the Jews had not destroyed the altars as instructed, so the temptation remained. The Jews had access to both how to worship Balaam and where to worship him. The locations were still up. The people were allowed to remain that worshipped him. So when they wanted to go astray, all they had to do was say, hey, that's how you do it. Hey, this is where we do it. Let's go. Forget this Yahweh. Balaam's word's really at. Verse 8, therefore the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the children of Israel served Cushan-Rishathaim 8 years. How would you like that to be your name? Cushan-Rishathaim. Could probably be 10 before he knew how to pronounce it and spell it. The fake gods did not have legitimate power to save a nation or sell a nation. Yahweh did, and Yahweh does. Okay? Yahweh, God, had the power to turn them over. They went after these false gods and were trusting in these false gods, and God said, well, fine then. Trust in them. Here. Go get some divine discipline. Here, Cushan-Rishathaim, take care of them. Verse 9, and when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised up a deliverer to the children of Israel, who delivered them, even Othniel the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. God delivered them to Cushan-Rishathaim, and God will deliver them from Cushan-Rishathaim. Verse 10, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he judged Israel, and went out to war, and the Lord delivered Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand, and his hand prevailed against Cushan-Rishathaim. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. This was the source of his ability to lead and conquer. It was God. God has the power. God had the power to give them over to Cushan-Rishathaim, and God had the power to defeat Cushan-Rishathaim, and God still has the power today to defeat our modern enemies. He did not lose this capability over time. With God on their side, they defeated them, as was expected. Verse 11, and the land had rest 40 years, and Othniel the son of Kenaz died. So we need to have what it takes to win. We need to have the power of God. We also need an effective strategy. An effective strategy. Ehud had a pretty effective strategy here. Verse 12, and the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord. The Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. No sooner did the judge Othniel die than God allowed another king to reign over them, because the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. All right, the judge is gone. Yahweh's pretty good, but I think let's go back to that Baal fella. I bet he's better. Let's go serve Ashtaroth. So they went back to it. And what happens? God strengthens Eglon, king of Moab. Verse 13, and he gathered unto him the children of Ammon and Amalek, and went and smote Israel, and possessed the city of palm trees. So the children of Israel served Eglon and the king of Moab 18 years. It took 18 years for the Jews to learn their lesson. Sometimes I complain when it takes my kids a few weeks to decide to, quit doing something they shouldn't ought. 18 years they were under God's divine discipline. Verse 15, but when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised them up and delivered. Ehud, the son of Gerar, a Benjamite, a man left-handed, and by him the children of Israel sent a present unto Eglon, the king of Moab. After 18 years, they finally said, all right, Lord, enough. We give. We're sorry. Please help us. Ehud was to be the next judge. Ehud was part of the group sent to give the tribute money, the present, to Eglon. The text of Judges 3:15 can be translated, a man handicapped in his right hand. This might be why the king was willing to hear Ehud's message in private. Why would you take and listen to a warrior's message in private? Sure, I'll send my protection away. You can talk to me by yourself. That might be why this was the case, because Eglon probably looked at him and said, he's not much of a threat. He's not even, a full able body. He's handicapped, Got a handicap. A man with only one fighting arm is of less danger. Verse 16, but Ehud made him a dagger which had 2 edges of a cubit length, and he did gird it under his raiment upon his right thigh. And he brought the present to Eglon, king of Moab, and Eglon was a very fat man. How fat? Well, we'll find in just a second. And when he had made an effort to offer the present, he sent away the people that bear the present. But he himself turned again from the quarries that were by Gilgal, and said, I have a secret errand unto thee, O king. Who said, keep silence. And all that stood by him went out from him. And Ehud came unto him, and he was sitting in a summer parlor which he had for himself alone. And he had said, I have a message from God unto thee. And he arose out of his seat, and he had put forth his left hand, took the dagger, which, remember, this dagger was a cubit of length, decent length, took the dagger from his right thigh and thrust it into this very fat man's belly. And the haft also went in after the blade, and the fat closed upon the blade, so that he could not draw the dagger out of his belly. And the dirt came out. Okay, think about how fat this guy would have to be for the blade to go in, and then you've got your end of your handle and stuff. That went in too, and it closed around it. His fat closed around it so much so that he could not remove the dagger. This man was very, very fat. So it goes in, you can't take it back out. And if Eglon was not so ridiculously fat, he might actually have been able to survive this event, because he might have seen the dagger coming and been able to jump to the side. But somebody who is excessively fat like this, we're not talking about a little higher body fat percentage than what would be ideal. We're talking about somebody who is extraordinarily obese. If if he was not so much that way, he might have been able to do something about it, but he couldn't. So the dagger goes in, can't draw the dagger back out. Verse 23, and Ehud went forth through the porch, shut the doors of the parlor upon him, and locked them. And when he was gone, his servants came, and when they saw that, behold, the doors of the parlor were locked, they said, surely he covereth his feet in the summer chamber. It's a euphemism for using the bathroom. Okay? So they're using the bathroom. And they tarried till they were ashamed. And behold, he opened not the doors of the parlor. Therefore they took a key and opened them, and behold, their Lord was fallen down dead on the earth. And Ehud escaped while they tarried, and passed through the quarries, and escaped unto Sirah. And it came to pass when he was come, that he blew a trumpet in the Mount Ephraim, and the children of Israel went down with him from the mountain, and he before them. And he said unto them, follow after me, for the Lord hath delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hands. And they went down after him, and took the fords of Jordan toward Moab, and suffered not a man to pass over. And they slew Moab at that time about 10,000 men, all lusty and all men of valor. And there escaped not a man. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest fourscore years. Ehud had a wonderful plan that God allowed to be very, very effective. He tricked Eglon into having this private meeting. He hid a custom-made dagger specifically designed for the slaying of this man. Ehud was an unlikely candidate from the job for our perspective. He was a man that was probably handicapped. But from God's perspective, he was just the ticket. He was just what was needed. God allowed this strategy to work very effectively because Ehud was on the Lord's side. He was the man God had selected for the job. See, when you go with the power of God, when you go with an effective strategy, the Lord's on your side, the enemies fall. They do. Shamgar. Persistent courage. So, we need what it takes to win. We need power, God's power. We need an effective strategy, and we need persistent courage. You always need God's power. You need an effective plan, but you also need courage. Courage to do the absurd. Courage to march around Jericho. Courage to walk on water. Courage to not fear all the prophets of Baal who are against you. Courage to serve a risen Savior, and the courage to tell others about Him. Verse 31, last verse of the chapter. And after him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, which slew of the Philistines 600 men with an ox goad. And he also delivered Israel. An ox goad, an ancient farm implement, versus 600 trained and equipped Philistine soldiers. The courage that Shamgar needed for this endeavor was unbelievable. But guess what? God was on his side. So the unbelievable results happened. You need the courage to face the enemy, knowing that it's not you who are really fighting them, it's God. God took Shamgar, even if he was fantastically strong, even if he was a fabulous warrior, an ox goad does not compare to a sword. Especially 600 men with a sword. That is an insurmountable task to a human, but something entirely accomplishable to God. To paraphrase Ian Bounds, the world is looking for better methods, but God is looking for better men and women who understand the basics, the power of the Holy Spirit, wise strategy, and steadfast courage. Othniel, Ehud, and Shamgar are examples of this. They've shown us the way. We need God's power. We need an effective strategy. That God is hopefully it came directly from Him, or God is willing to bless. I mean, sometimes God kind of directs us as we go along, and we come up with a plan, and then God blesses it. And we need the courage to go implement it and go forward. Are you and I willing to do that? Are we willing to step out and do something big for the Lord? Take on a challenge that to our humanness is impossible. But since God is on our side, is entirely capable of being accomplished. Lord, I thank you for this day. Help us all to be willing to go face the foe. Help us to be willing to stand up and do what's right. Help us to have your power on our side because we are on your side.